Hello, everyone. This is Chala Dinkoy, CEO and founder of The Repositioning Expert, welcoming you with another Tuesday Tea Time with Chala. Here you go, taking a sip. Today is lemon tea, water, whatever it is. I'm supposed to drink every day because when I got a private labs done, because I'm in Canada, everything is, not usually private. But yeah, I need some vitamin C. So I'm having, instead of tea, it's kind of like lemon water. What are we talking about today? I mean, it's crazy because I'm running in from one meeting, running into another meeting. And then I'm going to take my little guy because it's the last few days of his, off school, free days in the summer. I'm taking him to the paintball, whatever, paint gun, whatever that thing is. And it's going to be lovely. It's going to be a lovely evening while I watch him, in war gear, which is slightly disturbing to me as a pacifist Canadian. But yeah, even though everybody's on vacation or going on vacation, I'm still running out of time. I'm like running from one job to another, one meeting to another. So I am very grateful to be able to do this. Now, one of the things that recently one of my clients and I talked about is this "we'll get back to you" itis and how to prevent it, because it's one of the most common objections that you'll hear in any type of selling, but especially B2B corporate selling, because you're of a certain caliber. If you've actually gotten into the room, if they've actually listened to you, you've actually, got some of the buyer team there, you've brought in some people in your team, and you are a likely contender, hopefully, for that meeting, for them to have carved out enough time to spend on wasting their time. So for it to end with "we'll get back to you" itis is like an itis, because it's like a condition, I think. So as a former buyer of services when I worked at a corporation, let me tell you why I used to do that. And it's not just me, by the way. It's everybody in corporations that I watched and were on my buying team. We used to do this. And here are some of the reasons why we used to do this is, one, I wanted to shop around. So it's terrible. It's awful to say, but I wanted to see if I can get something better, find some more value, find something that was more earth shattering for me, because I wasn't sold completely, or it wasn't a big enough need. And I thought I had time. So that was one of them. I wanted to shop around. The second reason why this "we'll get back to you" itis happens is because I didn't want to buy from them, but I wasn't brave or honest enough to tell them that. So that's another reason why I'll have to think about it. That's what it means. The reason number three is I wanted to buy, but I wasn't sure what the other people on the team thought. So we had to get back, together and then think about, okay, did everybody like it? What were some of your concerns? And are we going to buy or not? So it was to buy time. Reason number four was I wanted to buy, but I wasn't sure it was in the budget for this year or for that, specific category, whatever it was. I needed to check my numbers. I needed to check my budget. And I didn't want to fess up that I wasn't prepared enough to know what was or wasn't in my budget or what I could liberate. So those are some of the considerations that were always going through my head as a buyer of services when I worked for Pepsi, Frito-Lay, and I used to say, "we'll get back to you" to a vendor during a sales meeting. Now, what are some of the ways to avoid it? Now, this is what I teach my clients, and that's what happened when one of my favorite clients came back and she had made an enormous sale of, record breaking for her, groundbreaking. It was unbelievable, but yet they kept, delaying the final sign. And it was like, "we'll get back to you, we'll get back to you, we'll get back to you." And so that's what, is the inspiration for this for this blog today, for this Tuesday tea time. And in fact, I actually want to bring her on as a guest on some of the next ones to talk about this big deal that she was able to pull together very quickly within a very short period of time of working together. So here are some of the ways, and this is what I actually told her. I asked her, she was, like on cloud nine, and I said, how could you have avoided this waiting? How could you have dialed it in much faster? So we talked about some of those things. So, so some of these relate to her and others don't, but take from it what you will. And there's always a reason why there's, we'll get back to you, itis. So here's some of the ways to avoid it. Number one is you have to have the right people in the room. So there's usually two people who make a buying decision. It's usually, now, I don't mean that there's two people in the buying team. There's usually way bigger buying teams now, especially since COVID. They've gone up to like 5 to 7 people. And especially if it's a big purchase, it could be even bigger. So, but there's essentially a budget person who has to approve the budget, and then the functional person who has to approve the purchase that's actually going to be using, or their people are going to be using the product or service. So you need to have the authority and you need to have the budget person. Sometimes they're the same, sometimes they're spread over 10 people, but you need to have one of each in the room that can actually speak to their concerns and can actually object to your whatever presentation, to whatever you're saying, so that you can overcome their objections, so that you can understand their point of view, and that you can shorten that lead time so that there's none of the we'll get back to you itis, because we'll get back to you, some of the reasons are so the people in the room can go and talk to the actual people, the budget and the authority, who aren't actually there in the room, to get their approval. So that's one of the things that you can do to avoid the we'll get back to you. Number two is get agreement on what the problem is in the meeting with those people included, the budget and the authority included. And then more importantly, get an agreement on how much it's costing the company. Now, this one's a doozy, because one of the sales meetings that I went into with a corporation, and there was a huge team of them. And of course, at the time, there was only me. And had I known then what I know now, I would have gone in with a bigger buyer team. And because that's one of the things that statistics say, is that when you match each other's buying team size, that's when there's equal power and respect. So in this case, I was alone, and there was a huge, 7-10 people in the buying side. And when I tried to come up with numbers to substantiate how much they were losing based on the problem that I was going to help them solve, the financial guy got his back up and said, I know exactly what you're doing. You're trying to sell by numbers, what you're trying to stack up costs to compare your final price so that it looks like it's, a fraction of what the problem is. So I handed it over to him and I said, yes, but also I don't really know what to recommend for you based on what the scope of the problem is. So I'm trying to size and scope the problem by trying to work on some assumptions of what the problem is and how much it's costing you. So then I said, I turned it over to him. I said, why don't you tell me? Why don't you tell us how much you think this problem is costing you? And of course, he had his back up, and he was, he stopped talking and he was hostile from then on. But basically, that's what you need to do, is get agreement in the room about what the problem is exactly and how much it's costing them. And you should have a back of the envelope, back of your pocket prices for what the problems are in the industry. So that's why I'm such a big proponent of having an industry focus, is because once you've worked with enough and sold to enough of the same kind of industry target, you begin to know their costs, you begin to know their pain, you begin to know their language, you begin to know everything. But most importantly, that's one of the steps that a lot of my clients were missing before they met me, is that they weren't actually coming up with the dollar amount of the cost of the problem in that meeting. So that's one of the ways to avoid the we'll get back to you itis, because you're putting dollar amounts and solid foundations of steps into the actual sales conversation. Okay. Number 3 of the 5 ways to avoid the we'll get back to you itis is outline how you'll help them step by step in time increments. So, first we would do blah, blah, blah within a week of signing. Then we would do blah, 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 which would take at least another 2 weeks. Then, it would take another month and we would accomplish and establish blah, blah, blah. So you take the whole work of what you would do, simplify it into just simple steps, nothing so detailed that they can go and replicate it on their own or give it to another vendor who's cheaper, but top lines that involve your unique strategy, your unique steps, your unique differentiators, whatever they are, methodologies, but you give them by time limits. So you tell them this is how much it's going to take, this is how long it'll take. And the reason why this helps you avoid the we'll get back to you itis is because it lays it out in a concrete way of how quickly the problem's going to be solved, or in what timeline the problem's going to be solved. So it makes you look like you know exactly what you're doing. You're a professional. You've done this a million times. You know how to get them to where they need, and that we need to go. We need to sign a signature. And you're kind of seeding it while you're talking about in the conversation of, well, once we have the sign, once we have the go, then we push the button, and then this is what happens. Then this is what happens. And so you're laying it out as a visual of what the solution is going to look like. Number 4 of the 5 ways to avoid the we'll get back to you itis in a sales conversation is co-create a scope of work together in the room. And at the end, ask for their agreement about name a cost and ask for the agreement. So make a scope of work together, okay, and involve them in this, because they've probably been down this road before, whether in this lifetime or the past. They've probably made mistakes doing exactly what you're suggesting, or going down the path. So they're not newborns. They can also contribute to what needs to happen when, in what scope, what geography, in what numbers, how many people need to be involved, how much time needs to be involved, whatever your parameters are that you would consider in your scope of work, put them all in, okay? And then at the end, ask them, offer them a price range for this whole scope of work, and ask them if there's agreement to it, saying which piece would you like to bite off right now. So that's critical, because all research shows that if you mention both the budget and the price, so the budget is their budget and your price is your price of how much you're going to charge in the first meeting, your sales cycle shortens dramatically. So I want you to really, really hone in on my clients and I, that's one of the things that we do often is we role play what's going to be said in the room, what the scope of work is going to look like. And in fact, that's what we did with the client that had the big win, is we role played, we dry ran what it was going to be like. She actually did the numbers in her head of what she would recommend, and she would get their buy-in by asking them whether and how much of each of the steps they thought would be involved and appropriate. And then, she gave them a budget and then asked for agreement to it. Now, the last and most critical part of the 5 ways to avoid we'll get back to you itis is do not leave without a date. So what I mean by that is you need to have agreement to the next time that you're going to interface with them with an actual appointment. Now, if they're not able to give you that appointment, there's 2 reasons. One is, like I mentioned, all the reasons why I didn't want to talk to people at that time, why I didn't want to go ahead. It was because I was avoiding it. I was shopping for someone else. So it's an avoidance tactic, and they're just not going to give you that date, in which case that'll actually tell you, where they're at. They're definitely not a hot lead at that time, right? So the other option is that they just don't know when they'll be available, or they don't know when all the other team members will be available, or they don't know when the next step has to occur based on all the other things that need to occur. So what you need to do is ask them to get a date. So say, okay, I understand that you don't have a date for everyone today, but is it okay if I call you Monday at noon, Monday at 3 to be able to get that from you and get that into the, send them as soon as you go back to your office, send them an actual invite, get their agreement. If they're absolutely refusing to agree to that, that is a very, very good indication that there was an objection that you missed. And that's a whole other class. But so anyways, guys, all the reminders are popping up for all my other meetings, but I hope that was helpful in the last few days of the summer here. While everybody's having fun, I'm like working to provide value and to be here for my clients, and hope that was good. And by next week, when I talk to you guys, it's going to be, kids are going to be back to school, I think. Woohoo! Oh my gosh, that is worth drinking for. Woo. I promise there's nothing fun in there. Anyway, all the best, everyone. Try to avoid those we'll get back to itis. Take care. Have a good one.